Bruins Beat is brought to you by PrizePicks and the GameTime app.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat, presented by PrizePicks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $50 back when you play $5. And we're presented by GameTime. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $20 off that first purchase. Terms apply. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That is Conor Ryan. Connor, what is up?
Evan, I'm doing well. How you doing?
Doing great. Doing great. We're closer to hockey season, which is always a good thing. We are right there on the doorstep. And we have some new comments from different insiders around the NHL about Jeremy Swayman and the contract negotiations. And the whole realm of reporters are weighing in. Elliot Friedman, Darren Dreger, and they've both reported some interesting things over the last couple days, at least since you and I have last spoke. And one thing was Elliot Friedman, I think it was over the weekend, mentioned that Jeremy Swayman might be looking for the Charlie McAvoy contract, or at least that was their initial asking price. And again, that's $9.5 million per. Most recently, today, I believe, Darren Dreger went on radio, I think in Toronto, and mentioned that I can't keep track of all the TSN radios and everything up there. I can't do it. But he went up there and said basically that they're actually a little bit closer than people think in terms of negotiations and where they're at. What do you make of sort of the latest with Swayman?
I mean, I think in terms of the timeline, right, I kind of agree with what Dreger mentioned. And it's even something that I think Andrew Raycroft mentioned weeks ago, where even if you're at that point when you get to the summer and everyone's away, everyone's traveling, it can be tough at times to bridge the gap and make progress on these contract talks. But you get to this point of the year, it flips to September. You've got players coming back for training camp now. It does feel like things start picking up now. You got people in the same building. Jeremy Swayman's at Warrior anyway right now, even though he's technically not under contract. So I don't know if we can even talk to him right now because I don't know if he's actually under contract with the Bruins. But I do think when you get to this time of the year, even if, let's say a few weeks ago, they were still really far apart in terms of term, payout, anything like that. If Jeremy Swayman's looking for a McAvoy level deal and the Bruins are offering 6.75 or something like that, even if you have these, contentious disagreements in terms of where the contract is, I do tend to agree with what Dreger's mentioning. It's something that, again, has been mentioned many times before, that once you get to this time of the year with training camp right around the corner, everyone in the same building, it's not like Jeremy Swayman's in the cafeteria part of like the Bruins lounge and sees Don Sweeney with like the tray and just like, get away. Yeah, I don't think that's happening in terms of where these kind of dynamics are and where these negotiations are right now. So yeah, I tend to agree more with what Dreger says. Again, I'm not fretting over the state of these contracts in terms of, is this going to be an extended holdout, or are we going to get into October and it's Korpisalo and Brendan Bussey because they can't get a deal done with Swayman? I'm not hitting the panic button there yet, but I do agree that once you get to this point of the calendar of the offseason, if you even want to call it the offseason at this point, it does feel like momentum gets picked up. That even if maybe a few weeks ago these talks weren't where you wanted them to be, it's only natural these things really pick up once you get to this time of the year.
Absolutely. And I think that's true. And I don't think there will be a holdout. I do think, though, like, again, Friedman mentioning that, the ask was the McAvoy contract. Like, you and I have discussed this a bunch of times at this point, but like 9.5, that's where I'm like, where's that coming from? And my guess is, it's coming from, hey, you're hoping that he is a $9.5 million a year goaltender, and it looks like he will be, but I get the Bruins end of it where it's like, well, he hasn't been so far. Like, he's been a tandem goalie for the last 3 years, and he had a nice 2 rounds in the playoffs this year. Again, it sounds like we're trashing him. We're not, but is he 9.5 million per? Like, that's where I think, like, 8 to me is where you sort of draw that line. It's like, all right, 8 times 8, that you can work with that. 8 times 9.5 for someone who, does not have the credentials of a $9.5 million a year goalie. And we've mentioned some other goalies that are, sort of in that ballpark. Like, that's where it's like, I mean, good for him for asking. But if that's the ask, then I'm not surprised that that there hasn't been a deal done yet.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like, right, Evan, you look at where the up and down, the roller coaster that has been this negotiation, a lot of it's been through reports, leaks to the media, stuff like that. It does feel like when we talk about like whether it's a long-term deal, a bridge deal, is it 6.2 million? Is it 9.5? Is it 10 million? Right? It does feel like through all kind of the ups and downs of how this has gone so far, the easiest way to remedy this is like 8 million, 7.5, 8 million. And that seems like a good point where, again, Swayman gets paid. Some of it is banking off that potential, obviously, but it does seem like a way to get this guy locked in long-term to a deal that should age pretty well over time if he lives up to the billing, right? But again, maybe the Bruins still aren't comfortable with having him in that spot of that payout. Maybe they still want the bridge deal, which I still kind of disagree with in terms of I'd rather just sign him long-term. I know there's more risk involved maybe. If you're the Bruins, maybe they are anxious about, they want to see more from him before handing him 7 years, 8 years, or something like that. But I don't know. I think when you look at just the dynamics of this cap and the fact that just, another year or two down the road, a guy that's, giving you 25 goals a year, Tyler Toffoli, like in a few years down the road, a guy like Tyler Toffoli, who's a good player, will give you 25, 30 goals, and there's a lot of value to that. He's probably making like 10 million in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Like the market's going to get pretty wacky in a couple of years. So I think it's important for a team like the Bruins, if you think you have a guy that is a franchise fixture, maybe that is the holdup. But if that's a guy you think is worth investing in, I'd rather you lock him in long term. Like look at like with Charlie McAvoy, which kind of reset the expectations on what these players are going to get paid. That deal is going to look pretty good in another couple of years or so. Even David Pastrnak, who's a 60 goal scorer, making $11.5 million, looks steep right now. What's it going to be when the Toffoli's are getting 10, 10.5 million, right? You got Leon Draisaitl making 14, 15. What about Austin Matthews when this bridge deal is up, or Connor McDavid, right? Like, I think if you have these guys that you think are going to be the foundations of your team moving forward, I think it's important to sign them up, sign them as long as possible, just because I think the market is going to get pretty wacky the next couple of years.
It is, and that's also life. I mean, that's the life of the NHL contract structure. Like, time goes by, cap goes up, deals look cheaper, some look worse. That's the way it works. And I think, credit to players for wanting to keep up with that and get paid market value. I'm in agreement with that. But if you want a long-term deal, that's sort of what the trade-off is. Like, you hope that that's around your market value in 6-7 years, but it probably won't be. But that's okay because you're making a lot of money and you have long-term stability in a place that you like. Now, the thing with Swayman that I always come back to, and this is why I am open to an 8-year, $8 million a year deal. Like if he was Yaroslav Askarov with the Sharks, right? You trade for this hot young goalie prospect and he, does well in those first couple of years. Great goalie for sure, but you didn't develop him. You did not bring him up. Swayman was drafted here. He was developed, obviously, at Maine, but then came here, developed. Like, this has been a Bruins guy for years now. Their handprints are all over him. And that, to me, is why I'm like, well, that's, they know. They've had him for a while. They have shaped him. They have formed him. He had Alfie Michaud in Maine, who was a terrific goalie coach up there, an assistant coach up there who works with the goalies. But like to me, there's more in that than there is, they went and traded for this great hot goalie prospect, right before he got to the show. And he's worked out. But again, like that to me is why, like, there is that added element of Swayman where it's like, I think when we mention like franchise pillars right now, it's McAvoy and Pastrnak, long term. And obviously, of course, you have guys like Zacha and Lindholm and Hampus Lindholm and so on and so forth. But like the true pillars, the guys you have to the most money, McAvoy, Pastrnak, we're almost there on Swayman. Like you and I are, we're like always like, well, and probably Swayman. It's like we think it. It's just not like the McAvoy deal is where I'm like, huh.
Yeah.
And so to me, like if the Swayman camp clearly does want that, reportedly. That bridge deal would make sense for them in the sense that, hey, make, $6.757 million for 4 years and then get that, $11 million, $12 million a year deal 4 years from now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, it's you do run that risk, I guess, right? The Bruins don't want to be a team allocating all this money to a guy that maybe you still have question marks over, but I don't know, man. Like, it does feel like every year Swayman has made steps forward that even if he's like, maybe you're worried that he's not going to be like a top 3 goalie. Maybe he's not going to be in the same tier as a Shesterkin or something like that. But even if he's not like a Shesterkin or an Ottinger or one of these guys or a Hellebuck, what have you, that, is like unquestioned, like an S tier. Maybe he's an A tier goalie, which honestly, if you have an A tier goalie and you look at how friggin' tough it is to project, which team ends up hoisting the cup, having an A tier goalie that can be locked in and can get it hot at the right time, that's not inconceivable these guys can get on a roll here, right? There's not like a Binnington situation or what, Aiden Hill was like a few years ago.
Yeah.
But how often is it that the Hellebuck or the Ottinger or one of these guys is the one that leads you to the promised land, right? Like, I think as long as you have a very good goalie that can play at a high level when needed, you have a chance. So maybe the Bruins do view him as a guy that we'd rather you keep around the 6 million, 7 million per year thing moving forward, as opposed to giving him 9.5. And again, maybe that's the market changes that kind of dictates what you have there. Maybe the Bruins want to see more from him before handing him a long-term deal. But I can kind of get the rationale of the Bruins and being not concerned, but wanting to see more from this guy who's only played, what's his highest games played, like 44 games, I think, last year. I think that's around that.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to want to see more maybe before they commit that much term. But again, I just think you look at the way the market's going. I think you'd rather be the team that has guys locked in moving forward as opposed to kind of playing how the market's going to change. Because barring there being another calamity, Evan, or another pandemic, the cap's going to be jumping up. I imagine. I can't foresee something else going catastrophically wrong. But I think if you're the Bruins, yes, I think if you're the Bruins, you'd rather be a team that has your top assets all locked in long term as opposed to it's like playing the housing market. It's usually not smart to kind of roll the dice there. I think if you're the Bruins and you're dealing with cap space in a surging market, especially. It's better to be risk averse than kind of rolling the dice there moving forward.
We've said this with goalies so many times because there is this narrative of, oh, you can put anybody in there and if they just get hot, you can make a run in the playoffs and, it doesn't matter who it is, Aiden Hill or Jordan Binnington or Anton Hudobin, but that's so random. And when you have a good goalie, a Hellebuck, a Swayman, a Shesterkin, a Vasilevsky, guys like that, the percentages of them having a hot run are so much higher. Like if you have those guys for 5, 6, 7, 8 years even, there's a good chance like there's going to be maybe 2, 3 runs, like long, good runs in there. It doesn't mean that, Swayman had a very good one this year. The scoring wasn't there, so it only went 2 rounds. But you see that with goalies, and I think you have that. And that's why, like, when you have a guy like Swayman who has that potential, you keep him around, and you bet on that. And I think that that's a safe bet. Because again, I just, I hear it all the time of, oh, they can put anybody in net and, Bussy could make a run. And it's like, yeah, he could, but the percentages of Swayman making a run right now are a little bit higher. And by a little bit, I mean a lot. So, I think the goaltending thing, and that's a whole nother can of worms. It's almost like quarterbacking a bit. I mean, quarterbacking is more important, obviously, but I was going to say in the sense of if you have a good goalie, you at least know you're going to be competitive in it. If you don't, not as fun. Not as fun. Something that's always fun. Our good friends over at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePicks community today. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. One Caleb Williams passing yard gets you one win on PrizePicks every week in September. That's right, only 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. 4 weeks of free W's. Don't miss this deal on PrizePicks because it's gone when September ends. PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves in the first half and doesn't return, your picks are still live. Big questions going into the football season. Will Patrick Mahomes throw for more or less than 267.5 yards one week? Will Jalen Hurts throw for 240.5 passing yards another? Download the PrizePicks app today and use code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus because it's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Now, back to the show. So, Connor, you wrote on Monday a story of sort of 5 positional battles at training camp, the big ones. And I don't want to give them all away because you guys should go read the story. But the 5th one I found interesting. One of the ones you had that we haven't really talked much about was on defense because the D are pretty, solidified. You've got McAvoy, Lindholm, Carlo. You've got Zadorov now. You've got Peak. You got Lowry. And then you got your 7th defenseman in Parker Wotherspoon. By the way, just did an interview with Mason Lowry, so y'all should go listen to that whenever it comes out. So
Hey,
make sure to go do that. But one thing, that's a good decor. Like I like that decor. I think, Wotherspoon is a 7th D, as we've said 1,000 times, is great. But do they have anybody after him? Like, that's sort of my one concern is, you can never have too many defensemen. And I just wonder if this is going to be an area at the deadline where, if they're competitive, which they should be, are they going and getting another depth defenseman who might not play all the time, but is there sort of in case of emergency? Do you think they need or will need sort of another defenseman down the road?
I mean, I think it depends on probably how Wotherspoon fares in that role. Because I think people should be high on him as a 7th D. If you're doing like a list across the NHL of who are like the spare defensemen on NHL rosters, they have to imagine that Wotherspoon's probably near the top. Like, I think I was really impressed with what he showed last year.
Yeah.
But again, like you don't want to have a situation. I always, when I think of like the depth on defense, you always think about the Bruins Ottawa playoff series where it was like Tommy Cross. And like it was a very, very barren, scratching the bottom of the barrel there. And again, that is maybe a absurd run of bad luck in terms of the injury bug there. But I think it's good to at least have a few guys down in Providence maybe that are available. Which again, maybe this year, like the Bruins probably aren't the most stacked defensively in terms of like guys knocking on the door, maybe in Providence. But we'll see kind of how this year is with players down there. Maybe there's a guy that develops and steps up there. They've signed a few guys. You got like Bavaro and some of these younger players that maybe hold their own in the AHL and have room to grow. And maybe they end up being kind of that spear piece. But I think you have to give those guys a run first to see what they have. Again, maybe in a perfect scenario, you don't have to deal with it. You have just Wotherspoon.
That would be nice.
Because I think he can do a really good job if pressed into more reps this year in case injuries do inevitably sprout up, which will be the case. But I do think that, it's something you could address at the deadline. But I say that in terms of, maybe it's someone you give up a 4th or 5th round pick for. Maybe it's just another kind of just insurance more than anything else. Like, I don't think you need to go and get a guy that you're expecting to play 16, 17 minutes right off the bat or anything like that.
I agree.
And again, it can change based on what injuries are, all those kinds of things. But I imagine they look kind of internally first, seeing who rises to the top there in Providence, impresses. Every year they always add these veteran players that have had a cup of coffee in the NHL before. So I think there'll be options as the year goes on, and Ryan Mougenel and his staff do a great job developing these guys and getting them ready for the NHL. So I don't think it's going to be like top of the list. Like if you told me looking, through the
No.
crystal ball, months down the road, I have to imagine probably if they're targeting anything, it's probably going to be like a top 6 wing if things go
Yes.
haywire. But
If we have to spend like multiple podcasts on like who could they get as like an 8th defenseman?
yeah. So
maybe not
again,
the most entertaining.
if things go haywire, then maybe they find the guy who's a spare piece on another team or something like that. But I think they look more internally first and see kind of how the year plays out. That's one of those best laid plans are not good to set in place for this sport, especially with how much injuries and unforeseen things always seem to pop up as the year goes on.
I agree. I like Wotherspoon a lot. I think he can, play every night for sure. My kind of break glass case of emergency thing is sort of that 2017 Senators series where it's like you're down 2-3 defensemen. And you again, they went out, they signed Billy Sweezy. I mean, that is a guy who can step in. You've got, I believe you have Ian Mitchell still. So he's another one that can step right in. And, there are other guys. Michael Callahan's a younger guy down there.
They have options.
Step in. They have options for sure. I mean, do they have, like a future number one down there? Probably not. But guys who can step in and make an impact when needed, they might. I mean, hey, when Torrey Krug came up, it was an college free agent signing that people didn't know a ton about. So
maybe like Frederic Brunet or someone like. But again, there's also these guys down in Providence who, are they NHL material? It remains to be seen. But again, look at the track record of Providence and what they've done in terms of getting guys ready for the pro game. Maybe one of those guys takes steps forward. I don't think Bruins fans should set expectations for that, but every year does seem like there's 1 or 2 guys that we don't really have marked on our, must-watch list. Who do you take steps forward down there and kind of rise to the top of the depth chart? So be something worth monitoring as the year goes on.
I agree. I want to get to a fun little stat that came out last week on the Bruins. But first, quick word from our friends over at GameTime. Fall is beginning, which means football is back. Nothing beats a college football atmosphere. And with both college and NFL games, who doesn't love a good tailgate? Get to the game with GameTime. GameTime has a new feature called GameTime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. GameTime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. This fall, my friends and I are going to the Patriots-Titans game in Tennessee. And how will we get tickets for the game? GameTime, of course. The super deal has been amazing to us in the past, and there's no doubt it will be great to us again. I just love the curated deals, which make it easier to find the best price on great seats. Some other features I love are the lowest price guarantee, or GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference. GameTime Picks curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. All-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. So, download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Now, back to the show. So last week, Connor, you tweeted out Mark Kastelik talking about, that everybody's big on this roster. Said, quote, I think that's something that stood out to me when I got traded here, how big and heavy everybody is. He even mentioned, he usually feels like the biggest guy in the room. This dressing room, a little bit different. He kind of just is one of the big men. And
what a crop.
Exactly. What a crop.
That's a crop.
Yeah, exactly. But and I get that reference. I get that it's not a Godfather reference. I actually understand that. I think you should leave reference. At Mark Hussey _MA tweeted out NHL teams ranked by average weight. And the Bruins are the heaviest. 207 pounds. They're the heaviest team in the league.
Some beef.
Golden Knights. They're beefy crop. Beefy boys. Number 2, Vegas at 205. Number 3 is the Islanders at 203. And Maple Leafs are actually right there too at 203 as well. Lightest team, by the way, is the Avalanche at 32. 192 pounds they are. And again, That's probably the fastest team in the NHL. I don't have the stats in front of me, but my guess is they at least play the fastest in the NHL. So the Bruins are a big team. They're heavy. They've been going this way for the last 2 years, and now it seems like it's an overdrive. There's big guys throughout the lineup. The D-core, I mean, McAvoy even said he feels like he's the smallest defenseman when he actually probably hits the hardest. Well, maybe not Zadorov, but, again, McAvoy it'd be either him or Zadorov. Do you worry about team speed, though?
I mean, I actually don't, because I look at where the Bruins are ranked there, and I also think some of it maybe is skewed a little bit, because I think Zadorov is far and away the heaviest player. I think he's 250 or something like that. So that kind of skewers it in terms of but I think it's one thing if you had your whole team was full of Pat Maroons or Lucicis, these guys that are big and aren't necessarily known for their speed, right? I think you look at the Bruins, even though they do have size there, I think it's all about kind of the play style. I think it's not a coincidence, but I think they've identified guys with size that also have good skating ability. Again, Zadorov is not going to beat Cale Makar in a race, but he, I think, is more mobile than you think he is. I think you look at the fourth line. You've got Mark Kastelic, who's 6'4". You got Johnny Beecher, who's 6'3", 215. Max Jones is 6'3", 220, I think. They move pretty well for their size. And again, you look at down the rest of their lineup, Charlie Coyle moves pretty well for a guy that's 6'3". Zacha is 6'4", which I think people forget about, which again, doesn't really...
I think they do.
He doesn't really play like that. But that is a guy that, it's all I think about length, especially for some of these players. Even a guy like Brendan Carlo. Brendan Carlo is not a bruiser out there, but he uses his frame to the advantage in terms of breaking up, intercepting passes, using his frame to be in the right positions. I think it's more of a coincidence or not inconsequential, but it's not the primary reason that Don Sweeney had a blueprint. It was I need the biggest boys out there. No, I think I think it's finding the way these guys
find me the biggest men there are.
Yes, exactly. So I think Zadorov probably played into that a little bit, right? Just because I think his skill set is so in your face, evident of what he provides. But I think you look at that fourth line, how they play. And again, even look at some of these guys, right? Where the teams are ranked. The Florida Panthers are 29th at 194. There's probably Bruins are 207, Panthers are 194. Look at the way they play. Do the Panthers feel like one of the lightest teams in the league?
Not at all.
No. They play with their hair on fire, and they will smack the shit out of you on the forecheck. Doesn't matter how big those guys are. So I think a lot of it has to do with just the play style. And I think the Bruins are trying to find that blend of size and speed. And I think you're seeing that. It'd be one thing if they just signed a bunch of, Joel Edmondson and Pat Maroon and these guys that are big for the sake of being big, and it helps their game. But I think there's more to these guys than just their size. I think it's kind of how the Bruins wanted to approach building out this roster.
I think the reason some people think they've gotten slower is they've sort of struggled in the last couple years at finding those big guys who can skate. You look at guys like Derek Forbort. Again, Forbort had his moments of, he had his upsides, but I don't think skating was one of them. Go out and signing, Lucic and, Pat Maroon, and you had Nick Ritchie a couple of years ago. And I think those were areas where, hey, we need to get bigger, and he just couldn't really find the right guy for it. Whereas again, you look at that fourth line, you mentioned Beecher, Kastelic, Jones. Those guys can get quick on a forecheck and are big and can be imposing and also can generate a lot of physicality with their speed. So I think that's where I don't worry so much about their speed. Now, again, if they're playing the Avalanche, I think anybody has to worry about the Avalanche's speed.
Right.
But you're right. I think they are, they've got guys I think Beecher's the perfect example. 6'3", as you said, I think 215, skates like the wind, an elite skater. So again, I think that's why he was a national kid or national program kid, and, sort of a high recruit. So, I'm not worried about their team speed. I like the direction they're going in. We make fun of the big guys who can't really move. Oh, they need an enforcer. But this is legitimate playing weight. This is weight that you can throw around and you can still skate and do all those things. So it sure will be interesting. And we'll have a lot more on that as training camp gets here. This week, there's rookie camp coming up. We got the golf. We We got the day at the golf course, which will be always enlightening. And everything's getting in motion.
back.
Connor, what can people look forward to from you over at the Globe and Boston.com?
Yeah, we'll have you covered every step of the way as training camp and preseason ramp up, starting with rookie camp. So whether it's lineup projections, breakdowns, columns, features, all that stuff you can find over at Boston.com and the Boston Globe. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can at Conor Ryan _93.
Go do all that. That's Conor Ryan. I'm Evan Marinofsky. You Bruins Beat listeners. Have a great rest of your week.